I am Joe Christofoli, the Chief Entertainment Critic for NOIAFT, and I'm here with Mark Spano to talk about his wonderful documentary, Sicily, Land of Love and Strife. And this is an amazing survey, your documentary of Sicilian culture of food, wine, ceramics, mosaics, marionette puppetry, the painting of Antonello di Messina influencing Da Vinci, modern painting as a protest of modern fascism, the topography of Sicily, current issues in immigration. I was wondering right off the bat, what is your experience as an Italian American, as a Sicilian American, and what brought you to this movie?
Okay, what brought me to this movie? That's pretty easy. When I was a little kid, people would say, you know, ask my nationality or my heritage, and I would say Sicilian, and they would only have one response to that. And it wasn't pasta with sardines.
Yeah.
It was, oh, is your dad in the mafia?
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, my dad works in a steel mill. It's a hell of a cover.
Right.
that I heard that all my life. And then when I would ask the old people, they didn't want to remember.
Yeah.
You know, so they were very vague about Sicily because it was hard. They left for a reason. Right. And so more and more, I started writing and doing the film work. And in North Carolina, where I live right now, I live outside of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I've done a lot of film on historic sites and architecture and economy and agriculture in North Carolina. And one day, when I was in a position to where I could kind of do what I wanted to do, which was fairly late in life, you know, I said, I've been talking about other people's cultures. Nobody's talked about mine. There's no movie out there. And when I started my film, there wasn't. And now Sicily's all of a sudden the darling of the media, but it didn't used to be. I said, I'm going to make this film. And basically, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to tell people about 3,000 years of culture that they don't know about, that didn't show up in the Grand Tour, that wasn't part of everybody's, oh, we love Italy. Yeah, what do they love about Italy? Well, I mean, I've got nothing against those parts of Northern Italy where everybody goes, but nobody talks about where my family came from. And I wanted to start that discussion because there's more discussion of Southern Italy and of Sicily than simply organized crime. And it bothered me, to tell you the truth. So, and that's one of the reasons you say my movie, somebody said my movie's just this big mess of things together about Sicily. And it is because I wanted to tell so much of what people don't know about this island, about the size of Rhode Island, at the toe of Italy.
Well, you definitely succeeded in doing that. And
well, thank you.
And thank you for doing that, because I very much understand exactly what you're saying. The movie starts with such a gorgeous shot of the sea, of a beach, or the waves, you know, crashing against the walls of
Siracusa. It's off of Ortigia.
Yeah. I was. And,
if you know Ortigia, you must, right?
Well, I know that coast.
Okay.
But I was wondering right off the bat, because you have so much beautiful imagery, and this is a documentary, not a narrative fiction movie. How did you approach the visual language of the shoot? You know, did you have, say, a series? I don't know how familiar you were with the island before, but visually, but did you have a series of, say, shots or things you wanted to visually represent that you knew when you got there? Or were you open to, say, you know, when you got there, for the floodgates to be open and grab this?
The answer is yes. as you well know, you're a filmmaker. You prepare, right?
Yeah.
And then you get there, and then you adapt. And when you make a movie in Sicily, and that I could write a book about, you do a lot of adapting, because of how things are going to unfold, or not, as the case may be, and so visually, all right. The head of my chief videographer, director of photography for this is David Tyson, another person I've worked with for about 25 years, and David and I don't have to speak to each other anymore.
That's great.
You know, he carries the camera with, even to meals, right? And he knows what I want. If something's going to happen, I see him. I look at the camera, and before I look at it, he's reaching for it.
That's great.
Right? And now David wasn't on the entire. He was on most of the shoot, but he was about 25% of the shooting, which was mostly interviews, were done without David. I had Sicilian, two Sicilian videographers who were wonderful, actually, and I brought another American colleague, friend of mine, along on one trip. It took. How
long was the shoot?
Took about 5. Well, it took about 6 trips to Sicily to make the film. 3 of them I shot on. All of the 3 shooting trips were over 3 weeks, and the last one was 5 weeks. And that David couldn't stay for the full 5 weeks. I had other people helping me out there.
Wow. And over how much time, these 6 trips, over how much time was that?
Well, the 6 trips were over about 5 years. Okay. The shooting trips were over 2 years.
Okay.
We're over 15 and 16.
Okay. Yeah, you cover so much ground in the movie. That makes sense. A sort of a similar question. How did you construct the narrative? Were you dead set on the theme before you got there, or did you arrive, and likewise with the visuals, did you let the floodgates open, or was it the same thing where you knew what you wanted to get to and then just allowed for happy spontaneity, or so to speak?
Well, sometimes that spontaneity isn't always happy. But
right. Well, I'm trying to.
Right. Sometimes. I've been doing this. I'm 71. All right. I've been doing this since I was about 22 years old.
You know what you're doing.
I mean, my living with video.
Okay.
I said, as an undergraduate at Georgetown, I went into the audiovisual department to work as an undergraduate, and I've never left. I'm still in the audiovisual department.
My parents actually met in Georgetown. They actually had left the convent and the Diocese of Brooklyn because they wanted to have a family with the faith that they would find their spouse. And they met in grad school at Catholic University. And lo and behold, at a wine and cheese party in Georgetown, a former priest and a former nun met each other and got married. So Georgetown
Terrific.
is a place in my heart.
I love it.
Even though I'm from Syracuse, and in college basketball, they're our mortal enemy, but I have a son. Georgetown.
You have to understand, I live in North Carolina, so I can't say too much when we talk about college basketball, because
North Carolina, the Tar Heels.
I live near Chapel Hill. UNC. And my partner works for Duke.
Oh, Duke. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
So we can't.
Not Tar Heels.
I can't take too many sides here.
Yeah. That's funny. my next question was, at the very beginning of the movie, you invite the viewer to reimagine Sicily with you, to reimagine 3,000 years of culture, of beauty and tradition. And then at the end of the movie, you say, whatever people think about Sicily, it's time to reimagine it. You may have answered the question already in terms of people asking your whole life, is your father in the mafia? But what do you think the image of Sicily is for most people?
Well, boy, I can't speak for most people.
Right.
I can speak to my experience. And my experience was meager through my life about Sicily because they didn't want to talk about it. And what did I know? Well, I knew food. I knew all the dirty words, right? What we learned first, right? And we knew some stories, but they were vague. They were much more, oh, you're in America now. You're going to be this way. You know, they didn't want to remember that. And it was poverty. You know, they were escaping poverty. But my own family probably did not know how rich a culture they lived in, that they were in the middle of. You know, when you're at a certain level of socioeconomics, you're not thinking about culture, you're thinking about 3 squares a day, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so it took me a long time. I started reading about Sicily. I bet I've read 300 books on Sicily. I started talking to people about Sicily, scholars, some of whom appear in my film. And I started seeing where my blank spaces were and seeing my surprises, you know, and sort of sharing them with the rest of the world as I learned. But there were things, of course, food and culture, which are the best, you know, the best way to know any culture is to know their food, know their music, the things that delight you, that you can't go wrong. You can't have an argument with somebody when you're eating and singing and dancing, you know?
Good point.
That's the stuff that we had certainly from our families, but we didn't have it quite to the degree that you experience it when you're there. I mean, when I say when I'm in Sicily, you're not in Europe, you're not in Africa, you're not in the Middle East, but you're in something that's kind of the mix of that, and it's hard to tell what it is. And that's what we were talking about New Orleans. I says, New Orleans is going to surprise you with about whatever you think New Orleans is, or the South is, or, you know, what is it? 1/3 of the white jazz players from New Orleans were Sicilian.
Yeah, New Orleans, I think, could be a wonderful prototype for a lot of goals of diversity and championing of culture in America. When you do that documentary, let me know. I'll definitely.
Okay. Well, actually, what's his name? Michael Acapinti from Toronto. You know who he is? The Sicilian Music Project, Sicilian Jazz Project.
I don't.
He and I, for the last few years, we've been talking about doing something about Sicilians in jazz, but not Sicilian Americans in jazz. Sicilians in jazz.
Yeah, you interviewed a jazz musician.
I did, yes.
About Love Vibrations, which I think was his new album. Really, really cool stuff.
And the thing is you know, there was this huge influx of Sicilians into New Orleans because of an arrangement that they had from Palermo to New Orleans. And these guys all came from a town that had a brass and percussion band for Holy Week, for St. Joseph's Day, for Santa Rosalia, whatever your saint's day was, you know.
In New Orleans, you're saying, or
No, in Sicily. They came to the United States
okay.
with these skills. So they played brass and percussion. They got to New Orleans and they said, hey, this is cool.
Yeah.
and there was back and forth. The best online radio station, and I'll send you the link if you're a jazz fan, the best online jazz radio station that I found is from Palermo.
Okay, what's the radio station?
Feltrinelli, the book and record store. I say record because I'm that old.
Yeah.
But
no records.
But the book store, the best jazz. Where? In Palermo at Feltrinelli. You know, I grew up in Kansas City. I think, you know, and I go to New York and different places and look for jazz recordings, and I find better jazz recordings in Palermo.
That's awesome.
This is crazy stuff. I mean, I love it. Whatever you think it is, it's more than you think it is. And that, I think, is a lesson that Americans need to learn about themselves, I guess. That's part of making my film, I think, is that, we're something, Sicilian people. We are something. We're a little bit different, yeah. And we're a little bit different in some pretty wonderful ways. And that's really what I wanted to put across.
That's a wonderful point you make about America in general. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's great that as Italian Americans, as Sicilian Americans, whatever ethnicity you may be, you know, start with yourself, and the personal can be relatable across the quilt, the patchwork that is American culture. That's great. Now I agree that I think, not that I know necessarily what it is, but I think that a lot of people have a fixed notion about Sicily. I can tell you for sure that whether it's my life in the United States, whether it was the Dominican Republic, or whether I was in the Philippines or Sweden, people also asked if I'm in the mafia. And you do make a wonderful recurring point in the movie about how Sicily is it's a bit of Europe, a bit of Africa, a bit of Asia. Someone in the movie, I want to say he's British, talks about the ambiguity in Sicily over its identity. John Dickey, the famous author, especially about the mafia, says, "Is there such a thing?" And you detail the Baroque visuals in Sicily, which is a mixing and harmonizing of styles. The mayor of Palermo talks about jazz as a mosaic. Its secret is to let pieces of stone stay in harmony. What do you think? Why do you think that the inherent diversity of the island is not in people's minds? Why do you think it's just such a monolithic organized crime type of
notion? Yes. Yeah. And there's one thing that can be said about Sicily, and that can be said about Italy. There's no such thing as monolithic.
Yeah.
that even Garibaldi said, we created a country, but I'm not quite sure we created a nation. And because you can walk from one village to the next, and the dialect changes.
Right.
You can walk from one village to the next, and the language changes.
And like you mentioned in the movie, they're not bastardizations of Italian.
No.
Dante's Tuscan dialect came after 1860 as the norm of Italian. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what was Sicily? Well, we have this modern expression that we use the word diversity, right? Well, Sicily was an experiment in diversity long before such words existed. Yeah. And why? Not for any good reason. well, maybe a good reason, because strategically, if you controlled Sicily, you controlled the Med. I mean, that, that was true in World War II.
I mean, it was true for the Carthaginians in the 300s.
Yes, and yes,
Yeah, yeah,
back to the Phoenicians.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, it was true. So who got invaded more than any place?
Right.
Sicily. And what happened? Well, the new kids in town kind of frightened the old kids in town into the hills, right? Or out of town, right? So they dispersed and they started their own community, right? And they kept to themselves and they didn't mingle with others. So their languages developed or evolved, and their cultures developed and evolved. And some of that is Greek, some of that is Muslim, some of it is Byzantine and French Norman, and which is really almost Viking, if you know, and Spanish, a huge amount of Spanish. Yeah. It's hard to put a label on that. There are couscous restaurants in Palermo. They're indigenous to Palermo. Right. They're not like Middle Easterners who moved there and opened a couscous restaurant. They've been there.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned, I love, because, when you talk with, through no fault of their own, you talk with most Americans who don't really know what happened 4 decades ago, but in the movie you talk about, I think you say, until 1051, the languages were Latin, Arabic, and Greek. Or, John Turturro has a nice documentary, Passione, about Neapolitan culture. And
I love it.
And someone says, well, from about 1200 to 1950, the music was like this. And we can talk about our living culture that goes back that far. That's very good points that you make. My next question pertains to the fact that I think a lot of people may be surprised by a number of things in your documentary, a number of things in Sicily, Land of Love and Strife. The fact that they see women in charge of things as proprietors, the celebrated way that Sicilians are known to adore their children. Not that he thought there should be a Disney World in Italy, but my father always said that Disney made a mistake putting Euro Disney in France because we really adore our children. The way that beauty is an important part of Sicilian life. And I also think that people would be surprised about gay culture. The fact that even a recent governor of Sicily, Rosario Crocetta, was gay. What was your impression of gay life, culture, freedom, and expression of Sicily? It is in the documentary. I don't know if there's any more to extrapolate on.
Well, let's look at Middle Eastern, Greek, Italian, Roman, Byzantine, these cultures that are all sort of folded into Sicily. Spanish. There's always been a gay or presence in arts and culture in those places for, before the Common Era. I mean, back 1000 BC, those things were known. The Empedocles from Agrigento was, all of his writings are dedicated to his lover, So even though there were these religious prohibitions, whether in Roman Catholicism or Orthodox Christianity, which there's Orthodox Christianity, and with Islam and Judaism, which also existed in Sicily, even though there were these prohibitions, the de facto, there were gay people.
Right.
And they were there. And they were contributing, and they were part of the cultures, part of those 3,000 years of culture that we're talking about. So now we're still having a conversation, which is a little tiresome, but that, you know, of who can marry or whatever, that I think those have been argued over the millennia. We should just move on. But I wanted to point that out because Sicily was always a place, a destination in Europe where other Northern Europeans felt free. They could go and we could live our lives, and people aren't gonna be cruel to us. They're not gonna ostracize us.
I think that alone is a revelatory idea for a lot of people regarding whatever their image of Sicily is. Very well said. So the last question that I had specifically had to do with this amazing quote that a scholar in your movie says, which is that it's the mix of religious devotion and sexual desire that lies at the heart of Southern Italian culture. You show how, you show Casata shaped like Sant'Agata's breasts, which I never thought before, but when you realize that she is known as a saint who was tortured, having them cut off, it makes perfect sense. You have someone who I believe is a Sicilian American talking about the continuity between life and death. It's full of joy, Sicilian culture, of trouble, but of joy. The artwork.
Troubles, yeah.
So violence and eroticism. Do you feel, not to cut you off, but to ask a question that someone asks in your movie, do you feel that Sicilians are very religious or are pretending? Or is it that paradox that's what it's all about? Or is there a clear answer?
No, there's no clear answer. I frequently say, I was raised Roman Catholic. Here I am talking to the issue of a priest and a nun.
Yeah.
I was raised Roman Catholic. I don't especially practice Roman Catholicism. Yet, if I lived in Sicily, well, when I am in Sicily, I function on the feast days and on the, it was St. Joseph's Day last week in North Carolina. That didn't mean anything. When I was a kid, it meant something. I got the day off school. People had St. Joseph's tables. There were things, those were community attachments. It doesn't matter what your religious belief is here. I don't want to get into theology here. I'm talking about how we cohered, how there was coherence in the community through saints' days and through festivals and through going to the Stations of the Cross during Lent and saying novenas. And there were all these things that were still a part of the culture. My cameraman and I were in Modica having dinner. After dinner, we're walking down the street, and all these people are pouring into this church, and it's fairly late at night. And I said, let's follow them. Let's see what they're doing. So he starts rolling, and we go in. And there's an older priest who's got all of these things out there, different cloths and different things, and they're all relics of Padre Pio. And I understood immediately what was going on. And my cameraman, who is from North Carolina and Protestant, I said, well, this afterward, I explained to him who Padre Pio was and what all the relics were about, how people collected them in the devotion. He says, where did you learn this? Right. I said, where I grew up, everybody knew this.
I hear that all the time. That's an amazing point that you make. I can't believe I heard.
And so, and you can say whatever you want about how Saint Agatha or Santa Rosalia or any of these patron saints or the different practices. Yes, they are religious, but they're also folkloric, and that also makes me, you know, that you're Sicilian in Pugliese and I'm Sicilian in Pugliese. We both are, right? We have some commonality here having to do with things like St. Joseph's tables and the kind of festas and you know, what kind of cookies did your grandma make at Christmas time, or what kind of pizza rustica or lamb-shaped cakes for Easter, right? Because we're in Easter week right now, all that stuff. In North Carolina, I talk about this stuff. People look at me like I'm nuts.
Yeah.
You know, prepare for the holidays.
Right.
They don't prepare for the holidays here. Right. They don't know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned, you know, here you are talking with the son of a priest and a nun. I remember, I don't remember if it was 10 or 15 years ago. I was in Rome, and I was in Vatican City in St. Peter's, and for whatever reason, I felt motivated to participate in the sacrament of penance. And I'm in the booth in St. Peter's, speaking Italian with the priest, and he asked, I forgot what I said, and he asked me to clarify something, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Father. You know, I'm the son of a priest and a nun," and his response was, it wasn't, what are you talking about? It was just, you know. So I have a feeling it shit happens more often than people may want to admit. But we have about, I think, 18 minutes, and I've gone through all my questions. So now, whatever you would like to talk about, you have an upcoming project called Ascent of the Family. Do I have that right?
Ascent of the Family, yes. This is an interesting project. We were scheduled to shoot this project summer of 20. Well, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now we're scheduled to shoot it summer of 22. And it is a story of a family who were sort of tied up in the soccorso morto, the death loan.
Yeah.
In the sulfur mines in Valguanera. And then they move, believe it or not, to West Virginia to coal mining. Yeah. Now, we look at coal mining in West Virginia and we say, oh boy, hard times. They saw it as a step up, and it was for them. And then they have, the whole family took even bigger steps up in terms of their education and so forth. But there's going to be an exposition in the Archaeological Museum in Valguanera that got postponed now 2 years, and we're going to go shoot that, interview all of these family members, and do a documentary tracing them from the sulfur mines now to people who are PhDs and bank presidents, and one woman is a cocktail singer, and it's a pretty interesting story of the evolution of a family. And
That's great.
And I mean, the whole deal with COVID, of course, was, you know, I was traveling around the country pretty regularly with my Sicily film.
Okay. And
then that stopped immediately, right, with COVID-19. So I want to get back to doing that because I love getting out there and having people tell me what my film is. You know, we write books and we make films. You know this. I think you're a writer. You do a lot of writing and filmmaking. We think we know what we did, but you get out with these with the public, and the public tells you what you did.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's wonderful to me to get that feedback. So I would like to get back to doing that. As soon as we can all travel. I want to get back to Sicily, of course. The wine writer, Dick Rosano, who was a wine writer for the Washington Post for years and years. I think he still is. And he's written a lot of books, but he and I have been talking about doing something on the Italian families of Napa Sonoma that basically turned what was a very communal sort of folkloric occupation of growing these grapes and making this wine, which were part of family life, which was part of mealtime, that was, they turned into an international business in the Napa and Sonoma wine industry. And it started very modestly with people who were just trying to hold on to something that they brought from the old country. Right.
Yeah. I think is Leon Panetta out there? I don't know if he has anything to do with wine, but I think he's in Sonoma. But just out of curiosity, I'm sure it may be a foregone answer, but any chance you might interview Coppola for that?
It's on in the proposal that we would.
Yeah, I have a feeling because we're from Queens, and well, I've been in Queens for about 20 plus years, and we're in the same neighborhood as the American Museum of the Moving Image, and we have people like Coppola come to Queens to talk, and he has, and I think he would really be down for a movie like that, especially knowing. I mean, he's actually, the irony is that he's not Sicilian and he's done The Godfather.
I know.
But I think he would be down for that. And you also have some self-published books. Tell us about your books.
Yeah, well, when I hang out my shingle, I say writer and filmmaker, right? And in most of my career, that's what I've done. I've had a few, what will we say, detours based on economic necessity. But most of
I have no idea what you're talking about. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I mean, but all of us who want these things, Italians still raise their kids to be filmmakers and writers. They raise their kids to be doctors. They raise their, I was raised to be Dr. Fauci, not Francis Ford Coppola. Right. That's grandma wants a real responsible grandson, somebody making movies that's out there.
Yeah, might as well be on.
But for economic reasons, I've kind of gone in and out of this, but mostly I have written and made films as my livelihood. And I have written an awful lot of fiction and nonfiction, and I've self-published a few pieces, but I have, some novels, some nonfiction writing, screenplays that I would like to get out there. I think it's pretty good stuff. I've been around for a while. I'm not an upstart, and I want to be an overnight success at 71 years old. How's that?
Well, I think it's funny. I'm a baseball fan. I follow the Society of American Baseball Research and everything. And you look at some guys who were legends and never had the opportunity to get center stage. And around 1950, they're working as retired janitors while Jackie Robinson ascends to the
exactly.
It's amazing when a couple of them were asked, do you feel you were born in the wrong time? And amazing how they so often say, no, I was born in the right time. And the work that we did, even though unheralded, allowed for someone like Jackie. But I think that you and I are living in a time with the democratization, not just of filmmaking, but even of distribution, whether it's literature
exactly.
or cinema. Yes. It's a prime time. But the key is, of course, you obviously know, overnight success is the tip of the iceberg, and the lifetime below it, maybe people don't see. But the work is definitely put in. Speaking of, you actually brought up something that I had as a side note. I didn't know if we were going to get into it. It may be banal, but I noticed that one of the first credits in Sicily, Land of Love and Strife, is this investment or production company, this LLC, that I think is specifically as investors. It didn't look like it was the name of a production company, but rather investors. I was wondering, how do you pitch a movie, a documentary of all things, to
It's Marco Sheku was the name of
Marco Sheffi, yeah,
which is
especially when the hook is
Mark the donkey.
but especially since the hook isn't the typical hook that people may think of when they think of a movie about Sicilian culture. How did you, what was your pitch? Out of
What
curiosity.
was my pitch? My pitch was back to the earliest conversation we had today. What do you know about Sicily? Well, guess what? There's more than pasta con sarda and the mafia.
And they were interested in that.
And well, I picked and choose who I spoke to.
Yeah. No, but that's great.
But yes, a great many. Actually, if you know the Sicilian community kind of nationally, Angelo Canillo invested in that film sight unseen. He didn't know me from Adam's House Cat from Buffalo. He brought me there to Buffalo to show the film. We had the best turnout of any of the performances because it was something that he felt, as I did, the same way. We got 3,000 years of culture, and all people are doing is pigeonholing us into these slots. Now, I'm not gonna badmouth gangster pictures because I love them.
No, me too. My problem is with the audience. God, my problem's with the audience.
And who am I to go head to head with Coppola and Scorsese? These guys make brilliant, gorgeous movies.
I've written organized crime scripts. Yeah,
yeah, and I have too. But there's got to be a limit. There's got to, this cannot be the only thing you see or hear when I say Sicily, that I'm Sicilian, that I'm Neapolitan. Well, I'm not, but if I say I'm from Naples, you know, what are you going to think of? You're going to think of Gomorrah, right? I want more than that. I want, you know.
Imagine if every movie about the United States was about the Ku Klux Klan or something, or, you know, it's
well, even cowboys. You know how many cowboys were black?
Right. Yeah, good
People
point.
don't know that there were black cowboys.
Apart from Blazing Saddles, yeah, you're
Blazing
right.
Saddles.
So Mark, I think we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. I don't want us to get cut off.
Okay.
So I definitely asked everything that I wanted to ask. I guess we could wrap it up. Is there anything else? I'm only rushing because I think we have about 5, 6 minutes left. Is there anything else that you wanted to get in?
I want to thank you for this. I love to talk about this odyssey, this journey of our roots, and how we have come to settle in Australia and the United States and Latin America and New Zealand and Alaska. And, you know, it's hard to get good, fresh mozzarella
In Alaska?
in Alaska.
I don't know. Yeah.
But well, it's pretty hard to get good Italian groceries in North Carolina. It's getting better. It's getting better. I love this because there's a message in it. It is that history is long, you know, and over history, we're all just passing through, and that's pretty exciting. I agree. there's some big surprises in our heritage, and finding those surprises, I think is really worth the effort. It really gives us a sense of who we are. That you know, here we are, Sicilian and Pugliese, we're kind of relatives, right?
Exactly. I couldn't choose a better point to end on, Mark.